What I've come to understand, and I think this is also underlined in the war issue of Epiphany, is that once you've experienced war, it is your constant companion. It may settle in the well of your consciousness, but it never quite leaves you. Today, words and images of war are all around us. The headlines online, in our magazines and newspapers, detail the realities of war. War memoirs are beginning to surface again. A third of the Oscar nominations for Best Picture this year deal with the politics of war. And increasingly, the ragged and bloodied material of war is being filtered through the minds of our poets and fiction writers, some of them veterans themselves. And this is a gift, really, to make something so devastating into a work of art. We were fortunate to have Brian Turner guest edit the issue. And Brian is a poet and former soldier who managed to bring together a collection of work that is at once beautiful and terrifying. In addition, our staff readers sorted through the hundreds of submissions we received after posting a call for war writing. It was not easy to read them one after the other, nor to reject them, so many of them too raw to publish. As I proofread the issue last month, I was transported and at times exhausted by the intense ferocity of each and every piece, with their alternating peaks of suffering and beauty. You might be unsettled reading this issue. It feels especially voyeuristic to read work detailing wars that have not yet ended, but I guarantee it is an issue that will remain in your consciousness for a long time. So we have some wonderful readers reading tonight, and the first I'm going to introduce is John Chopan, whose story Men of Principle appeared in an earlier issue of Epiphany. Like many of these war stories, it refers to the fallout from war and the complicated net of urges that men and women drag around with them in its aftermath. John's stories have appeared in Glimmer Train, Smoke Lawn Quarterly, and others, and his powerful book of short stories that I was reading just this morning is great, Pulled from the River, was published by Black Lawrence Press in 2011. Please welcome John Chopan.
Ew. I don't really know if I need the microphone. It's pretty loud, as it were. So hi, I'm John. I was not in the war issue, but the issue before, or the couple issues before? I don't know. I'll just read the end of the short story that was in Epiphany. But I suppose in order to understand the story, there's a few things I need to tell you. So my narrator, his name is Tully. He's an Iraq war veteran. He is a Marine. He is based on one of my very close friends from home, which is in Rochester, New York, who is a Marine Corps veteran who did a tour of duty in Iraq. At the opening of the story, Tully informs the reader, and I'm going to inform you now, that his current girlfriend was raped, and she reveals this to him, as well as the name of the man that raped her. And so the night in question, as it were, is him and his friends searching for the man who raped her. I'm going to pick up where they found the guy that has raped her. And so it's three friends, Tully and his two buddies. And this is, in many ways, I suppose, a revenge story. And I think that's all you need to know. The title of the story was Men of Principle. So real quick, I'm sorry. So they have found the guy, and they've brought him outside of the bar that they're at. And this is their first sort of confrontation with him. When we got outside, Lesh was talking to him. They were smoking and laughing. The patio was empty, except for the four of us. Our arms drawn in toward our bodies, fighting off the cold. Jeff handed me a Marlboro, and we stood, the three of us, facing the guy, blowing smoke at him. My buddy here, Tully, Lesh said. He says he knows you. The laughter leaving his voice. The man looked right at me then. Our eyes locked, and I could see him searching for me in his memory. Lesh sat down in one of the plastic lawn chairs, put his arms behind his head. Jeff spat on the ground at his feet. The man looked away for a second as a car left the lot, flicked a cigarette into the snow. I'm afraid I can't place you, he said, reaching out his hand. I pulled my cigarette to my mouth, drew in a deep breath. Well, I know you, I said, exhaling puffs of smoke as I spoke. I've heard about you. Okay, he said. I know what you did, I said. The man pulled his hand back then. I'm not sure I know what you're talking about, he said. He took a step back. For the first time, it dawned on him that we had not come as friends. He looked at Lesh. Is this a joke? He said. Lesh smiled. No, he said. No joke. What's up then? What's the problem? When I heard him say that, something in me snapped. I guess all along I imagined he'd fess up to it, start bawling like some kid who got caught stealing. And before it even came to violence, I dreamed this man falling to his knees and begging our forgiveness. His ignorance made all the anger and disgust I had for him rise up into my throat. Before I could do anything, Lesh got up and punched him in the Adam's apple. He fell to his knees, the weight of him falling, popped one of his kneecaps free of the socket. Lesh grabbed the lawn chair he'd been sitting on and smashed it over the guy's back, the whole thing splitting into pieces. Lesh stood there, with only the arms of it left in his grip. That's the fucking problem, Lesh said, tossing the arms aside. No one said anything after that. All I could hear was that man sucking for air. I brought my knee to his face, could feel his nose bend and snap as he rolled slowly, like a dog going down to play dead. There was no stopping the beating that followed. We set to kicking him, Jeff stepping back so Lesh and I could work on him uninhibited. We kept at it like we were trying to kick in a door. And with each kick, a sense of righteousness pulsed through me, something I'd never felt before. In Iraq, nothing seemed this pure, this right. When we moved into cities, when we engaged with the enemy, it always felt played out. Because no one really knew who was good and who was bad, or why we were even there. The people we fought against hid in plain clothes amongst the population, and who could blame them, in a sense? Because otherwise they had no chance. But then, too, it seemed like a cowardly thing to do. It meant so many people who should not have been killed were. Fighting a war like that had a way of muddying the line between the good guys and the bad guys. It had a way of making things happen that could not be clearly divided into right or wrong. You did sometimes, against your better judgment, anything you could to feel safe, to feel like you'd make it through the war and get home. And because of that, I needed a righteous cause, needed a clearly defined enemy and a valid reason to destroy him. We were winded after a while. The snow stopped falling, and the ground began to freeze. I stood doubled over, sucking in air that burned my lungs. Lesh lit a cigarette. Jesus, Jeff said, look at that fucking mess. In front of us, the man lay curled in the fetal position, writhing, not knowing which parts of him hurt the most. Shut up, Lesh said, flicking ashes on him. You're giving me a headache. I started coughing violently. My muscles were already getting sore. I picked up my beer and finished what was left. Carry him to the bathroom, Lesh said, pointing to Jeff. What for, he asked. I think you pretty well ruined his night as it is. I caught my breath, held the empty bottle in my hand. Lesh looked over at me. Bring that, he said. We're going to finish this. I held the bottle in my hand. The lights in the bathroom reminded me of the lighting at a police station. I thought of myself, if only for a second, as a cop beating the information out of a suspect. I wanted to say all the cheesy things I thought a TV detective might say. Make him confess. Make him beg for his life. But I was tired just then. Was sick of the whole thing. Ready to go back to the bar and drink another beer. I was angry because what we'd done hadn't fixed anything for Emma. And I knew now, if I ever told her what I'd done, that she'd leave me, that she wouldn't find any good in it. I just wanted the guy to disappear. You're a piece of shit, I said. A real piece of shit. Lesh spat on him. Jeff stood with his back against the door, holding it shut so no one could come in. Let's get this over with, Lesh said, bending down to get a closer look at the guy. Someone knocked on the door. Fuck off, Jeff said. I looked down at the man for a few seconds, sitting there in his own blood, his own piss. I felt sorry for him, but that only made me hate him more. After a minute, I raised the bottle up over my head. You've got the wrong guy, he said, spitting out strings of blood. It was something in the sound of his voice, how desperate it was. I knew that he was telling the truth. I knew that he was not the one. But I said, I don't care. Said, you're going to pay. Thank you.
Our next reader is our poet tonight, Emily Brandt, who is here with great equanimity. We messed up her poem a little in the issue. And also she was here despite rumors to the contrary before the fiction writers. And also she edits the wonderful magazine No Dear, which is a poetry journal for NYC writers and teaches at a public high school in Brooklyn. She earned her MFA from NYU, where she was awarded a fellowship to teach creative writing to veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and her poems have recently appeared in Berkeley Poetry Review, Liar Liar, and Forklift, Ohio. Or Lear Lear, maybe. I don't know. Welcome, Emily Brandt.
Thank you. I'm going to read some poems from a series that I've been working on for a while, that take their titles rather from the 37 different materials used to make airplanes in the 1940s. My father was a pilot, and he flew in Vietnam for 7 years, and he flew commercial airlines for more than 20 years. And so each material sort of explores some aspect of either my relationship to my father, or stories that he's told me, or experiences of his in war, which certainly has, greatly impacted his role in the family. This one's called Lead. Men pulled galena, slick and blue, from Appalachian mines. They used to carve burial ornaments. Now they make lead, heavy and sweet, soft until alloyed for glass, bearing metal bullets. Half drunk, he told me he fell in the ice, slid plumb through the broken plates into the bite below, flailing raw boy arms. His coat heavy with sleeted water from the cove. Lamps pulled him out. The air was still without the ducts. Shock still until his bearings came. My father hid until he was dry. I don't know the spot. Maybe Lance's house or in the hollow of a tree. Afraid to tell his mother, he stood there, afraid she'd beat him, she'd cover him with her skirts. This one's a little bit more experimental, fiction. It's called Iron. Ore dug out of a sergeant from Center Moriches. The earth is refined and came to their house, laughed when he said he wanted carbon added to fly planes, a day of aptitude tests, simple to form the steel, engineering questions, then who, of which? Do you like better, your mother or your father? Engine cylinders, he can't remember his answers, or maid, or who killed, who cooked the ducks. Rubber. Your red lawnmower cut symmetrical rows, working the perimeter, outer edge to inner, shifting gear to take the slope onto the road, and pulling up the blades. I rode with you that June between your thin legs, your belly pressed to my back while I steered. The rolling tires, their sap of tropical trees marking the roads. Rubber shields instruments from shock, from feeling something unfamiliar, as the mower hummed and we sat closer than we ever had before or since. I was afraid, but not of you. I was overwhelmingly afraid for you. This is one of the ones in Epiphany, thank you. Silk. In the attic, boxed in mothballs, no silkworm's cocoon, no white mulberry leaves, rather a kimono from Lamdong and a taffeta gown in violet for bleached cotton long. Miles of silk thread coil the wires of aircraft electrical units. Radio waltzes spool the air traffic commands which fold around you, your switches, around you, on your workshop floor, scrubbed cat food cans, lengths of twine, blunted nails in coffee cans, wall sockets, brushes in their packages, locks in their packages, a wood plane, zip ties and bungee cords, spools. And upstairs, in your study so overfilled, you've moved out. Under boating magazines is your pile, pages of ball gowns clipped, cut and glued so the skirts flare fuller. Each one turns figure eights beneath the weight of men's things. Titanium. The plane's fuel filters through cylinders, amasses in an exhaust collector. The collector kept supple by titanium, which is processed from the minerals of a cooled volcano. The tailpipe absolves spent fuel into cloud. Imagine everything brittle, everything failing, falling, the ground rising to metal. I, at the high school, think of your artery collecting plaque with the utmost discretion. The blockage tucked behind your heart. On Friday, I got the call. Emergency room, a chest pain. An hour later, you died, came back under the paddles. I, stunned at work, erasing words from the board, while you crossed over, came back without photos, souvenir. Twice, you said scared shitless, and once you yelled at Mom for fumbling, for not hanging your urine collector properly on the arm of the bed. She can't do anything right, you said. You told me they gave you Zoloft, and I praised the doctor's wisdom. But you meant Zocor, which reduces cholesterol. The serotonin clouds in your brain raining. Your blood coursing healthy, collecting. And this last one is in Epiphany also, but the last two lines are missing in the magazine, so we'll just have to memorize them. Cork. There's only the cork bobbing in the sink where water soaks plates greased by meat. Think where the wing joins to the airplane's body. Think the passing air. Coat anything in this grease and it would burn, but the cork trees would be renewed in time for harvest. At the holiday table, you told us about a soldier you knew who slit his wrists. Cork can be harvested 12 times before the death of the tree. It's cork that forms the fairings, that smooth the surface so the plane can sail. Even the tip of the wing, so far from the body, must be streamlined, must be corked. Then you told us about a buddy shot down, imprisoned 7 years by the VC. He came home to a wife who had left him for dead, and so he died by his own hand. The bark of the cork oak deadens vibrations in the walls of the plane. Your bark, or your cork, or your oak. What has been cut from you 12 times, Dad? Sometimes you sit so still.